Hey everybody, welcome back. My name is Elise, and this is 10 to Life, your one-stop shop for everything true crime. We're talking about current cases, old cases, new cases, re-emerging cases, like the one we're talking about today. We really talk about it all. So if you are brand new and you've never heard of me, heard of this channel, I hope you enjoy today's case coverage and consider subscribing, because the more 10 to Lifers, the better. So today we have yet another new update in the Turpin case. Now, for those of you who are familiar with this case, it's the one where back in 2018, 13 siblings were removed from their parents' home after being shackled and starved for decades. One of the siblings, Jordan, who was 17 at the time, fled the house with the cell phone and called police. When they arrived, they found the 13 children were extremely malnourished, absolutely filthy, and had been chained to their beds. Now, I did do an update video a couple months ago regarding this case and where the kids are at now, some new revelations. However, since then, there has been even more information released, some angering information. 5 of the 13 children rescued from their parents' California house of horrors were taken to a new home, a foster home, where their foster dad allegedly essayed 2 of the sisters more than 50 times and tortured the other 3 Turpin kids. And he didn't do it alone. He did it alongside his wife and his daughter. Sick, foul, disgusting, gross. Now, if you're saying, hey, Annie, I thought you already did a video on this. This sounds really familiar. Yes, you are right, and I will link that video right here. However, as I said in the beginning of this, there are now even more disgusting updates here, and we are getting more information and a first-hand account of what happened from Jordan Turpin herself inside that foster home. There is a lot to unload here. So there is going to be some footage I'm showing you guys. There's going to be some news reports. I'm going to be telling you what's coming through some of these court documents. So I might layer in a couple pieces of that other video just so that it's not super duplicative when I say it. But I don't know. We'll see. We'll see once I start editing this where it goes from here. But if you see like an outfit change midway, that's why. Also, if you're not familiar with this case or you want to brush up on it, I'll link that playlist as well so that you can take a look at those, because there was a video I did, maybe 7 or 8 months ago now, where we showed the body cam footage from when the children were first taken out of their families, by their biological families' home. We go through all of those details. So again, if you just kind of want to deep dive on this case, go check that out. Now, as I mentioned, many of these Turpin siblings who were taken away from their biological home and put in a new home with a new foster family were just once again subjected to absolute cruelty. And these foster parents, along with their oldest daughter, were arrested and charged with some pretty horrific stuff.
A new report by ABC's 2020 alleges that since the 13 Turpin siblings escaped their abusive parents, they have been marred by Riverside County's missteps and mistakes in their case. The case captivated the nation when the Turpin parents were arrested in 2018 and later convicted on 14 felony counts. The children all had spent most of their lives indoors and hidden from the outside world. They were regularly beaten and starved, sometimes chained to their beds or put in cages for breaking house rules. Those rules included keeping their hands off their parents' food and remaining seated unless directed otherwise. After escaping the home, which has become known as the House of Horrors, the 7 minors were placed in foster homes. The report alleges that in one of the foster homes, several of the children were abused over an extended period of time. And in another home, a foster parent allegedly told one of the girls that she understands why her parents chained her up.
So now, since the arrest, I was able to get my hands on some of the court documents that outline the details of what took place. And guys, it's some of the cruelest stuff I've ever heard and ever read. So buckle up, and we are going to jump right in.
10 to Life with Elise starts right now.
63-year-old Marcelina Olguin, 58-year-old Rosa Olguin, and their 37-year-old daughter Lenny Olguin are currently facing multiple charges from alleged abuse against their 9 foster children. On July 20th this year, just literally a few days ago, Jordan Turpin and 5 of her siblings filed lawsuits against Riverside County and Childnet Youth and Family Services, which is a private foster care agency. In the complaint, they allege multiple violations as they endured continued at the hands of their new foster guardians.
After 13 children were rescued from a house of horrors in California, everyone was rooting for them. Now comes troubling news that 6 of the Turpin children have filed a lawsuit claiming they were all over again in foster care. Jim Murray has details.
Who would do such a thing? 6 of the youngest Turpin children who survived being tortured by their biological parents now say they've been abused by their foster parents. The children are now suing the foster care provider and Riverside County, claiming they knew the foster parents were unfit and had a prior history of physically and emotionally abuse. The foster parents, Marcelino and Rosa Olguin, have been charged with multiple counts.
2 of the siblings are identified in the document as Jane Doe 5 and Jane Doe 6 due to their age. And according to the complaint, after the children were rescued from their original House of Horrors, many of the siblings were placed with a married couple that Childnet certified as foster parents. The siblings alleged, however, that the married couple, identified in this complaint as Mr. and Mrs. O, but we know Mr. and Mrs. Olguin, subjected them to continued forms of physical and mental abuse, and oftentimes worse than what they were originally subjected to by their own parents. The children lived with Mr. and Mrs. O and their adult daughter from early 2018 until March of 2021, when the 3 were arrested for crimes stemming from alleged sex crimes and physical abuse of the foster children. And allegedly, Mr. and Mrs. O had a prior history of physically and emotionally abusing as well as severely neglecting children who had been placed in their care. And these complaints against the parents and their oldest daughter were allegedly all documented with that agency. So in this latest complaint from the Turpins, it alleges that Mr. O committed sex crimes against Turpin Jane Doe 5 and her siblings by grabbing and fondling their butt, legs, and other private parts, also kissing them on the mouth and making extremely sexually suggestive comments about them. Just sick and foul. So the father was a creep, like the creep of all creeps, and apparently would tell the girls that they were sexy, and he would recommend that they not wear any undershirts, saying that they had beautiful skin and that they should show it. And he also reportedly forcibly kissed them and even pulled one of the younger ones on top of him. So the rest of the Olguin family is also accused of forcing the entire group of the Turpin children, the 5 that they had fostered, into a confession circle talk. And what they would do in this is basically admit to past behavior that their biological parents forced them to do on each other, if you catch my drift here. Now, why would they do this? I highly, highly doubt that it was an effort for some sort of therapy or healing, but rather I believe that it was because they got their own personal sick pleasure out of hearing the details and hearing the stories and having them recount what they went through. And the confession circles allegedly began soon after the children arrived at the foster home, despite the parents knowing and having full knowledge of what these kids had previously suffered at the hands of their biological parents. One of the youngest girls, who was just 5 years old, was also allegedly given a sleeping pill and then forced to stand against the wall while the defendants sprayed her with water and rang a bell in her ear. And the adults allegedly were saying to her, "You don't let us sleep, so we're not letting you sleep." And they gave her that sleeping pill. They were, saying this in her ear, ringing the bell. And because of the sleeping pill, of course, the 5-year-old ended up collapsing onto the floor. It's just brutal. They also locked this little girl in her room for 9 hours a day and then never changed her diaper, apparently. And court documents allege that they would frighten her by telling her that there were spiders in her bathroom. They would hold her in this dark, noisy, scary bathroom, which they also, by the way, put a large decorative spider on the wall at one point, and they would hold her in this room despite her panicking and despite her crying and pleading to get out. The couple and their adult daughter also allegedly physically injured the children by pulling their hair, hitting them with a belt, and striking them in the head. Even more, they allegedly punished the children by forcing them to sit outside alone for many hours at a time, making them recount the horrors of living with their biological parents, telling them that they would be returned to their biological parents if they didn't behave. They also allegedly forced the kids to eat excessive amounts of food, which led to disorders, and they would then make them eat until they began to vomit. And after the kids began to vomit, they forced them to eat their own vomit. It is some of the cruelest actions I think I have ever heard. They were being tortured all over again after being assured that they would be taken care of and treated safely. The children were also allegedly forced to watch as a foster child in the adult daughter's care was severely physically injured. This family would force these children to relive their past over and over and over again. They would force the kids for hours to relive everything they went through. It is sick and just infuriating.
A foster family in Paris has been accused of abusing several foster children, including some of the Turpin siblings. Now, 3 of the family members were in court yesterday. Marcelino, Lenny's, and Rosa Ogan are accused of physically and psychologically abusing 9 foster children, including 5 of the Turpin kids. This comes nearly 4 years since 13 Turpin children were found shackled and starved and physically abused by their parents, David and Louise, in what authorities called a house of horrors.
Now, what kills me about this entire thing is that the caseworker for these children, when they were first removed from their parents' house, had said that she personally was so distraught by everything that she was going to make sure that she personally oversaw the case and their placement to make sure that this would never happen again and that they were placed in a good foster home. And not only did she not do that, but now when she's being questioned, she is not answering anything. So now not only have these children been put into a new foster home where they again are being treated horribly, but all of the money that was also once awarded to these kids has been held away from them. So they don't even have the means to build a life of their own outside of these, horrible homes that they are being put into.
The 6 adult siblings were all court-appointed a public guardian to manage their health care, nutrition, safety, housing, and education. But they were allegedly sent out into high-violence neighborhoods with little to no life skills. They had also allegedly been denied basic care from their public guardian, telling ABC that their guardian was often unwilling to offer simple support, such as teach them how to use public transportation, cross the street properly, and access their healthcare benefits. The older siblings have also struggled to find stable housing and even continue to starve. The report notes that the poor living conditions continued despite the siblings getting more than $600,000 in donations from strangers. It alleges that most of that money went into an official trust overseen by the court and hidden from public oversight. Riverside County District Attorney Mike Hestrin said that the public deserves to know what their government did and didn't do and how we failed these victims. He went on to say that it's unimaginable to him to see the worst case of child abuse, maybe the worst in California history, and not be able to get it together to give them basic needs, basic necessities.
Now, what really angers me here is at least one of the siblings during this time had conversations with their social worker in which she conveyed what was happening inside the home and asked for help. The Turpin children spoke up about what was happening in the foster home, but many times they were just shut down, they weren't listened to, and they were hushed by all of the employees of that private foster care agency. The entire county of Riverside and this Childnet foster agency turned their heads and closed their eyes as some of Riverside's most vulnerable children were being horrifically abused for a second time. It is simply unacceptable. A month before the family was arrested, Jordan Turpin, the daughter who saved her siblings from their first house of horrors, was placed in another foster home from that one, but was then kicked out while she was visiting her sister. She later discovered that documents filed in court falsely stated that she was in college and residing in her own apartment. Which, how does that happen? How are these kids put in another foster home, then one of them is kicked out, and how can you falsify records saying that she's now living in an apartment on her own? How is there not follow-up? How is this slipping through the cracks? So from there, she just started bouncing between her siblings' homes and often went hungry. And one day, Jordan decided she was going to walk into a Taco Bell and ask for a job because she was desperate. They offered her the night shift and she took it because she was so hungry and needed money. And she said that there were some nights when she would have to walk alone to work in the middle of the night for over an hour just to get to her shift so that she could afford to eat. And Jordan recently did an interview with People magazine. And in this interview, she said that at that point in her life, she slid into a very deep depression. And she is quoted saying, "I'm not ready to go into details about what happened to me in that home," meaning this new foster home. "I was very traumatized, and it has been a very scary journey. It was really hard to understand the first situation with my parents, but then going into another, that was just really, really hard. You have all of these questions, and you just don't get the answer." I can't even imagine. Like, how do you reconcile that? You escape one darkness, horrible circumstance just to be put into not only another, but one that's potentially and admittedly even worse. She says it was impossible to sleep and that every time her eyes would close, she would dream about being in that first foster home, and that she also had to go to the emergency room a lot because of this, saying that she was just really, really broken. Jordan finally moved into her own apartment this past February and says although it is much more expensive to live independently than she ever knew, she finally feels free. And she's quoted saying, "Sometimes I walk into my apartment and literally think, is this real? I'm more independent and can just be myself. This is everything I've ever wanted. I've been feeling like my life is about to actually start."
House of Horrors survivor Jordan Turpin is glammed up as a gorgeous redhead for this photo shoot. Posing in a sleeveless knit blouse and an asymmetrical crop top, she looks the epitome of high fashion.
I'm excited about having my own apartment. At first it was like unreal because it was like, this is everything I ever wanted, to be free.
Look how far she's come from that frightened teen who escaped from her parents' home and called 911.
I just ran away from home.
Okay.
My two little sisters right now are chained up.
In her People magazine cover shoot, Jordan gushed how Justin Bieber made her dreams come true, inviting all the Turpin children to his concert, where Jordan got to meet her idol, supermodel Hailey Bieber.
I ran up and I hugged her, and I didn't want to stop hugging her because she was just so sweet. And she was like, "Oh, it's a happy moment. You don't you don't have to cry." And I was like, "These are happy tears."
But behind that beautiful smile, she's also revealing new details of the horrific abuse she says she and her siblings suffered in foster care after escaping years of torture by their monstrous parents.
She was definitely suffering. She was tense and anxious, and her depression was crippling at times. There were times that she was extremely hungry. She said she would go 24 hours without eating and beg her social worker to give her some money so she could purchase food.
The children are now suing the foster care provider and Riverside County, California, claiming they had to have known the foster parents were unfit. Her foster parents pleaded not guilty to abuse charges.
Attorney Carly Sanchez is representing some of the Turpin children.
Some of my clients were abused in their foster home. They were hit, had their hair pulled out, hit with various objects, socially isolated.
She says the children who'd already grown up in the so-called Turpin House of Horrors went on to suffer 3 more years of heartbreaking abuse in foster care.
The emotional abuse that these children endured is horrific. They were told by their foster parents, "I understand why your parents chained you up. I would have done the same thing." When they went to their foster parents expressing depression, their foster parents gave them ideas about how they might successfully commit.
Some of the claims of abuse also focus around food.
They were forced to eat food that was covered in mold. They were forced to eat all of the food on their plates, regardless of how hungry they were. And they were forced to eat all the food on their plates to the point where some of them threw up. And then some of our clients were then forced to eat their own vomit.
So court documents indicate that they all pled not guilty back in December of 21. And once they were released and made bail and, they're awaiting trial in their next hearing, the foster father, Marcelina, was approached by a reporter. And they asked him if he was a PED, which you know what that means, and whether he regretted his treatment of the Turpin children or not. But Marcelino's response was simply, "F you," and then he went and hid in his garage like a little coward. But it's just, once again, this system has failed. And how does this happen? These kids were some of the most vulnerable. How do you not follow up with that? Due to the circumstances and the living conditions in which they came from, how do you not make extra sure and take extra precautions that they are being taken care of? And what kind of sick ass people does it take for a family to take a group of siblings that had experienced such horror and disgust and not only expose them to that all over again in new, sick, twisted ways, and sometimes even more brutal ways, but to also make them relive all of the horrific details for hours on end just for their own sick pleasure. And there is a special place for people like them. And I can't say what that place is here on YouTube because I'll probably get flagged, but you can imagine where my mind is going with that.
It's not only shocking, it should make everyone angry, because these children who were chained to their beds for a great majority of their life finally are freed, right? And then the county places them with Childnet and puts them in another position where they are further abused.
Childnet is a private foster care agency contracted by Riverside County east of Los Angeles. And in their lawsuit, the children say that the agency placed them in a home where they say the company knew that other foster care children who had spent time in that home had been abused.
I mean, this case is one where the entire world was watching, and yet even in that situation, the county and Childnet dropped the ball, which tells you, I think, pretty clearly what must be happening and what we've seen happen in other cases with kids who aren't famous, whose cases are not high profile, who nobody knows about.
It was a case of abuse and neglect in America in 2018 that broke hearts around the world.
They pull our hair, they yank out our hair. I have my two little sisters right now are chained up.
Okay, how old are you?
I'm 17.
What's your name?
Turpin.
In an emotional interview last November, Jordan Turpin first shared this story with ABC News anchor Diane Sawyer.
I don't know how you had the courage, never having spoken to anyone like that.
I think it was like us coming so close to death so many times, and like I was worried about my siblings, and when I saw them crying and worried, I just felt like I had to do it. Like I just wanted to do it. I wanted to help everyone.
According to the attorneys, the abuse in the foster home went on for 3 years until one of the children was old enough to leave and then told this story to a social worker.
I can't even tell you how many times our clients have told us, we just don't want this to happen to someone else.
Today, 4 of these 13 children, brothers and sisters, are still in foster care, but their attorneys tell us that they are safe, together, and on the road to recovery.
They are all placed together in one home. They seem to be doing quite well.
So the kids filed this complaint on July 20th, and they've also requested a jury trial. So they will finally get to speak their truth publicly and blast these disgusting humans for who they are. So I'm going to be following that very closely. I actually think I might go to this trial if I can. I should file that paperwork and petition to be there because it's only 45 minutes from where I live. I would like to be in that courtroom, actually. Maybe I will do that. So I'm going to keep you guys updated and follow this closely. Make sure to check back, subscribe if you haven't, if you want to get notified of those updates, because it's about time somebody makes sure that these kids are taken care of. How did this happen again? How did this happen again? Not to mention all of that money that was awarded to these kids that they were never even given. It blows my mind. It blows my mind. I have to just say, it's a little disheartening that I feel like every few months I'm coming on here saying we have an update in the Turpin case. This case originally took place in 2018, 5 years ago. And the updates that I'm making videos on, it's not to try to squeeze the case or milk the case or anything like that. It's because there are actually new horrific updates happening to these kids. And that is just very disheartening that 5 years later, we still are talking about this case because they are still victims. How does that happen? 5 years after safety, I say loosely, and they're still not safe. Like, where is the disconnect and where are things going wrong? It's unreal. It's unreal. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in with me today. I'm going to keep you guys updated, and God, I have like the goosebumps and chills right now. It just makes me so angry. So again, thanks for tuning in. Sorry, I kind of went off on a rant there. Until the next case, stay safe.